We'll take the foreplay as read.
I'm glad no one saw that. People might talk.
What the fuck is he on about? Fuck are you on about? Inconceivable!
It's a free country, don't you know that?
I didn't know it was that free.
Don't make people into heroes.
Fuck you. I can live my own life in my own way if I want to.
Thank you for joining me today. You're listening to A Schilling for Your Thoughts with your host, Heidi Schilling, and I have a special guest today.
Christopher R. Smith.
Hello, Christopher. What are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about snuff films.
Snuff films.
Yes.
What are snuff films for those that don't know? How do you define them?
Okay, and this is an important distinction because I think
we're going to argue about this.
Yeah, and we can, yeah. Because a lot of things get called snuff films.
Mm-hmm.
For me, what a true snuff film is, and there's debate whether they actually exist or not, is when a person is killed on camera, but not just that. I think to be a true snuff film, the person needed to be murdered for the purpose of that film. Like the person is being killed for the entertainment of someone who's going to be watching this film. So things like news footage where someone just happens to be caught on camera being killed just because there happened to be a camera on them in the moment, like accident footage, or even like politically based footage, like when you had the terrorists.
I think I disagree.
Yeah.
Like the beheading videos?
This is my thing, but that was for a cultural, political purpose. I think a snuff film is specifically pornographic.
Okay, how do you define porn? Here's what we need to find out.
Porn is cinema that is, or it could be other different forms, that is made to titillate, sexually titillate the person that's going to be watching it.
So here's the thing. What if I film my neighbors? If I can see my neighbors fucking in their backyard and I film them, and I upload it to a porn site, is that porn?
Yes, because you uploaded it to a site where people are going to go to watch.
So what if somebody catches an accident or a killing and uploads it to a gore site or a porn site? Is it then a snuff film?
I think no.
No.
Why is not a
But
true
if you
snuff
upload
film.
Porn, why is it still porn?
Okay,
a snuff film isn't.
A valid argument. Yeah.
that's why when people say that they don't exist, I'm like, I think technically they do.
Oh, yeah, those totally.
Or we're gonna have to start getting real specific with what we call porn.
But, yeah, kind of the. If it is an urban legend, the idea of there are these shady organizations that's the urban legend part.
Yes, I can agree with you on
people,
that.
Young women usually, but it could be men, to be murdered on camera and then sold to wealthy elites who.
So are we
are
talking like casting couch type stuff where it's supposed to be like they don't know they're going to be killed, or it's like that's what you're referring to. So these aren't people that know they're going to be killed and they're like, I'll be on film.
No, yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that there's like this conspiracy that, people are being lured away for snuff films.
That's the legend, at least.
What's the legend? And that's kind of hard to prove. And the reason it's hard to prove is I was doing a lot of research, because when you said snuff films aren't real, we talked about this a little bit before. I'm like, bullshit.
Well,
there's got to be
they're
one.
Totally, yeah.
But when I started researching, it was like, we have all the time on the news where you hear somebody getting arrested for child pornography.
Yes.
We never hear somebody getting arrested for making a snuff film.
Right.
I was like, oh shit. But then I thought about how many other countries there are.
Yes, most of them are known to come from other countries.
There's a lot of unrest, and it's like they're not going to get arrested. And a lot of the time the quality is bad, so it's like you can't really prove whether it's real or not. There's no victim because we're not going to know about it.
Yeah, and we'll get into it. There have been court cases where filmmakers were put on trial, specifically a Cannibal Holocaust, where they had to bring the actors out and say, no, look, they're here, they're fine.
Wasn't there, I've read somewhere that they had trouble finding one of the actors.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, we really didn't kill them. And so for a while, it was like they weren't sure if they were going to show up.
Ruggero Deodato, the director, was on trial.
He was on trial, and because they couldn't find that actor.
Yeah, and he's like, no, we lost he went on vacation somewhere, we can't find him.
Yeah, he was out of the country, and they didn't have a way to contact him. They're like, you need to get back. And he heard about the trial, and he came back, was like, whoops, here I am, I'm alive.
This was a movie.
Yes.
And so kind of a weird subject to just like I'm not just. I mean, I guess I am just a weirdo that's into weird shit.
He's just a weirdo.
But why specifically snuff films? captured my interest recently is because of this book I stumbled across.
You were gifted in a weird sort of way.
Yeah, we Nicholas Edward Jones, who from other Papago podcasts and things.
He's the less cool host on Campfire Curmudgeon and Our Tour Theory.
And yes, thank you. And we go usually every month go to trivia night at Valley Bar. It's usually movie trivia, and our group usually does very well. This time we came in second, which was humiliating, but the prize package was actually really good. They always usually it's just things they got from like Zia Records or just some used bookstore. Mm-hmm. They throw a bunch of stuff together and give it to you. This one was a great package. We got some great DVDs and stuff. But there was this book that I had never heard of this book. And it's called Killing for Culture, an illustrated history of death film from Mondo to Snuff by David Caracas, I think, and David Slater.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Caracas, I guess, yeah.
Something like that.
And so it was published in the UK. It's actually part of a series.
And it's a series. Interesting.
Yeah, about just kind of dark film. Like there's an interesting one that's about the beat poets and the beat writers. For a while in the 60s experimented with film.
Very
so there's
cool.
a book about that. So I want to look up some of these titles. It's a very this book is falling apart.
Yeah, it's very well read, well loved.
It's cheap
which kind
printing
of makes you wonder who owned it before you and what was the purpose, because they read that thing.
The cover is someone, and this is some kind of news footage, carrying a severed head.
Yes.
And it's real, I'm assuming. And that's the cover of this book.
That's the cover.
Yes.
And again, it's so hard to tell with these because, I mean, sometimes some of the fake stuff actually looks grosser than the real
the book
stuff.
gets into all of that and really examines the genre. The interesting thing also about it was published in 1995.
Okay.
That was pre-internet. And I think with the internet age, you can write an entirely another book on this.
100%.
Of things that have happened since. Because it covers one of the reasons that first really was like, holy shit, I need to read this, is it gets into the Mondo genre of films, which I find I think was one of the most fascinating, I don't know if you call it a movement or a genre exactly, and it's just been dismissed and not discussed by any kind of major serious film criticism.
Give us a quick synopsis of what that.
Okay, well, there are examples of it that go back to the silent era since they first started making movies, but it's called Mondo because the first movie that was a big hit was called Mondo Cane in 1960, which was it called itself a documentary, and it was just basically a travelogue of weird shit from around the world, cut together with some great music by Riz Ortolani, who also scored Cannibal Holocaust, one of the great Italian composers. And it was made by these two Italian filmmakers, Jacopetti and Prosperi.
Yes.
And it was a huge hit. Like, actually, there was a song in the film that was nominated for an Oscar.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
And so it was an Italian film, and at that time, the Italian B-movie industry, if one thing is successful, there's going to be dozens of imitators.
Yes.
And it just exploded. There was all these Mondo movies getting made.
And they weren't exactly shock films, but sometimes they did contain shocking things. But it was just kind of weird stuff. It was a compilation of oddities, essentially, in film form.
But a lot of times, what's really interesting with Jacopetti and Prosperi is, so they made Mondo Cane and then another film called Women of the World, and then all these imitators sprung up, and so they came back and were like, you guys are fucking taking our meal ticket.
That's my gig.
So then they made Mondo Cane 2 in 1962, which was almost entirely fake. And it's a brilliant film in that it's just absurdist comedy presenting itself as documentary. Like this is like Monty Python level shit.
Almost mocking themselves.
Yes,
they're like, well, fine, if you took our thing, we're going to ruin it.
We're going to show you how stupid this thing really is. Like there's a scene where there's a choir of guys that are standing on just standing in a row, and then there's a little person would walk up these steps and slap them and would play music by slapping them. Like it's completely ridiculous, and they knew that going in, but they still presented it like, oh, look, this is a real thing. And sometimes they would take footage from anthropological documentaries and footage of tribes, and the narration would be something describing completely different than what's actually happening, but they would just make up some bullshit that like, oh, this is like you'll see some European archaeologist interacting with the tribe, and it's like, oh, these are all his wives. He went out in the jungle and he married 15 women, and like they would just make up bullshit.
Yes.
And the genre got really crazy because like there were films that were just made of pieces of other films. They would take segments of other films, and it's actually very problematic because
because they're taking other people's work essentially and adding it in.
And there was a level of it was the 60s.
Yeah.
And there was a level of racism to it that like we're looking, a lot of them were based around African tribes and stuff, like, oh, look at these savages, and it's just the shock value of like, oh, look at their barbaric rituals and things. So it is a very it's an incredibly problematic genre. But I think just because of that, no one really wants to talk about it. They're just like, oh, that's the thing that happened. We're not proud of it, so let's just move on. But really, there's a lot of fascinating things, like Jacopetti and Prosperia in particular were incredible filmmakers. I mean, they're strong issues with a lot of their films, but they made a film called Africa Adio in 1966, which if you see the full version of it, is an incredible film, even though there's lots of problematic things about it. It was made in Africa when basically England was giving up their colonies in Africa back to the Africans. And the kind of why it's so problematic is the tone was kind of like, oh, Africa was this beautiful thing, but now it's going back to savagery because civilization is leaving. Civilization meaning the white Europeans.
Extremely problematic.
Extremely problematic. But it's also an incredibly well-made film. It's beautifully shot. There's also a lot of animal cruelty in the film. Yeah, they're shooting live, and then there's with that one, there's a very controversial thing because they're shooting warfare happening in the Congo. Yes. And there's actual people dying. Yeah, it's actual
warfare scenes.
But there are rumors that Jacopetti and Prosperi were they were with these like militias and things that were fighting each other, where maybe someone was going to be executed, and like, oh wait, can you stand over here because the light is better? Yes. And so there's
they
a
were
lot
maybe
of
directing
that.
some of these.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's it's incredibly problematic, but still Africa Adio, the full version is about 2.5 hours long, and I think is a very fascinating, incredible film. But it was released in most parts of the world under the title Africa Blood and Guts. Yes. And it was cut down to about 90 minutes. But there's some really fascinating stuff in there. If you can look at
it.
Yeah, if you can stomach it, and if you look at it through the lens of historical, like we're not condoning some of these ideas, but looking at it as an artifact of a certain time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that, like, it's a good reminder when people try to pretend racism is gone. It's like, no, it's still there, and yeah, it's better. Let's not forget how shitty it used to be. Like, sometimes it's kind of nice to watch things like that and be like, all right, we came a little bit of ways. Let's keep going.
Also, most interestingly, Jacopetti and Prosperi's next film, I think it was 1967, Goodbye Uncle Tom, which is doesn't really it's made in the Mondo documentary style that they pioneered, but it transports us back to it's about the slave trade in the mid 19th century. So everything is fabricated. And that one, it kind of like, there's still some moments that are a little racist, but they were trying to
you almost wonder if they were like, shit, let's
they were trying to show the horrors of racism, basically, because they were accused of being racist for the first one.
That was kind of their reaction.
And that was kind of the reaction. That is an incredible film, too. It's just the way they were great filmmakers. For all their problematic ideas, if you just look at the craft that they were working with, they were incredible filmmakers.
Side note, my internet service provider is now very freaked out. My VPN shut off at some point during my research, and I was like...
Because of things you were looking at?
Oh, cool. So...
Uh-oh.
It's for research. It's for research.
Yeah, that's how dangerous this episode is.
Sometimes when I Google stuff, before I Google it, I type, what I'm about to Google is for research. Please don't put me on a list.
Yes.
And then I delete it, and then I type it.
But anyway, to go back to this book, Killing for Culture, this was the first time I saw, and it's not the full book, but there were several chapters really going film by film, examining the Mondo genre, which is something I've always wanted to read. And I was actually getting to the point where it's like, if no one's going to do this, I'm going to write this myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the research to do it, which I might still do.
You could.
And but it also gets into the idea of the snuff film, of exploring the idea. It talks about the Faces of Death series, and kind of when the home video came out, there's this whole genre of death films of just gory footage. And that was a thriving industry on home video.
It's very interesting, too, because I think part of why that was so interesting, like the Faces of Death, I think like now they've come out and said like 80 or 90% of it is fake.
It was fake, yeah.
But with the video quality at the time, you couldn't really differentiate between what was real and what wasn't. It's kind of like, in a way, I think it shocked people, but I think now looking back on it, it's not nearly as awful as some of the stuff that you can readily find on the internet now, because it's that same thing of like when we see war photos that are in black and white, they're not nearly as horrifying as once, like if you've looked at them colorized.
The Vietnam era,
when people take like World War II photos and they colorize the photos, it's like, ooh, like all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is pretty bad.
Because I think when it's in black and white, it's history. It's this old thing that kind of is revered, but we don't really see, you don't see the blood and guts, and it was all blood and guts.
Yeah, and looking back on Faces of Death now, that's kind of how we see it, is like, this is old and this is out of date and this is not.
And because the first, I was surprised to learn this, the first Faces of Death movie came out in 1978. Which I always thought, when I heard about it, like growing up as a teenager and stuff, you're like, oh, have you heard of Faces of Death?
Yeah.
It's this crazy, like,
because there were so many sequels, and a lot of the time when people said,
and rip-offs and
when people said, have you seen Faces of Death, they weren't differentiating between which one. A lot of people
I think there were 4, the book breaks it down much more. There were 4 official Faces of Death movies going into the 90s.
Because I was trying to think of which one was the most popular in the 90s, and most people just called it Faces of Death. It was like number 4 or something, but that's
there was like Traces
people
of Death,
talked about,
which is just a rip-off. There was all these rip-offs, a lot of times using the same footage from the other movies, like the way the Mondo films did as well.
But the way that they did not explicitly bill this as like a snuff film, right? They just billed it as banned in a bunch of countries, and it's very scary, and it's found footage.
Although the snuff film, as the book details, has a really interesting origin. When in popular culture did the idea of the snuff film, if it is an urban legend, when did it come into the public consciousness? And there's a very specific date when that happened.
When is that?
It was the film called Snuff from 1975. So this was a movie made by a husband and wife filmmaking team who shot this movie in South America.
Yeah, they billed it as a movie that could only be made in South America.
Where life is cheap.
Yeah, where life
that
is
was the
cheap.
actual tagline.
That was the tagline.
And they made this movie that was about, like, the hippies were a thing at the time. People were afraid of hippies because the Manson things that had happened. So they made a movie about killer hippies in South America.
It was kind of like pre-Satanic Panic. We've got, like, hippie panic.
And that was a big thing. Like, a lot of the Mondo movies were about, like, the hippies and all these scary hippies, and they would shoot fake things about satanic rituals. And
basically,
that was kind of the moralizing in the Mondo movies, like, look at how horrible this is with their sex and violence and rock and roll, while it's reveling in the sex and violence and rock and roll. Like, it was all completely exploitive. And so this movie was made by this husband and wife team, and it was fucking terrible. Like, it was just an awful movie. It was barely finished. It sat on a shelf for years because it was just unreleasable. And then came along Alan Shackleton, who was a New York film distributor. He specialized in schlock. Just the crappiest, sleaziest things he could throw out there.
Okay.
I imagine this guy. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think I am. He has this. He's sweating in some dump of an office in Times Square in 1970s New York, Times Square. He's got his cigar in one hand and a pastrami sandwich in the other, and so he ended up securing the rights to this film.
Yeah.
When just as part of a package deal, and he's like, oh, this is a piece of shit. Like, even for me, this is a piece of shit.
What the fuck is this?
What am I supposed to do with this? I spent money on this. And so to figure out a way to actually get butts in seats, which is his only job.
Yeah, that's all he cared about.
Yeah, because once they were in there, if they hated it, it's like, well, sorry, no refunds.
Yeah.
You bought the ticket, so too late. And so what he ended up doing was creating, saying like, oh, this is from South America. This is some dangerous film, even though it was just obviously garbage.
Well, they built it almost as if it was true.
Yes, that's what they said.
A lot of people were under the impression that this was real footage.
And he shot a scene tacked on to the end where the movie was over, and then it cuts to the director and stuff, and then there's the script girl, and they bring her over to a bed and end up tying her down and killing her in a very ugly and badly made scene. The movie is not fun to watch.
No.
Even if you like, I love like that 70s kind of grindhouse cinema. This is not a good one.
No.
It's a famous one
because I mean the title.
Yeah, and it was called. He released it as Snuff. He added this thing like you will see an actual Snuff
murders.
film.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's really where the word came from, this movie. And because he released it like this and built all this controversy around it, and a lot of this was at a time when there was a lot of moral outrage about what was happening.
People were protesting this. They didn't want it coming to their
people
theaters.
Were
they didn't want
going
it coming to their towns.
Yeah.
There were some towns that didn't show it at all.
It was banned, and there were people that, because this was also at the time when hardcore pornography was becoming like Deep Throat was a big blockbuster success, a hardcore porn film that you had normal people like celebrities were flocking to see these movies. This was one of those, and that controversy made it a huge hit, even though it was a piece of shit, and he knew that. But he was able to market it so well and catch that zeitgeist. Yeah, even the
if you look at one version of the cover or what was like posters, it's like a woman. It's like a drawing of a woman like really curvy, and then it's got like it looks like she was drawn on a piece of paper that was cut apart and kind of like moved around a little bit. So it's already kind of mixing that like sex and violence right there. Totally. On the, before you even get into the movie, so people were like, no. Yeah. This is not, people were like, see, this is where porn leads. That's kind of... Yes, and that was what, there were people going on, like, television shows, having commentaries and saying, like, look how bad our society has gone. They're showing snuff films, and that's where the term really came from. Actual footage of murder showing in movie theaters in Times Square. And it was, if someone had actually taken the time to actually watch this piece of shit, they would have realized, obviously like, oh, this is stupid. But if you think about it, at the time, they didn't have the special effects we have. And it's so funny to ask people, like when they were kids, people that are much older, what was really scary to you? And it's like, oh, this black and white movie that is just like... We look at it now and we laugh, but at the time when they hadn't really seen much like that, they were like, "Holy shit, this is somebody dying." Although there's some cool, just to go back to that idea of looking back at the past and how things that scared people in other generations. I think it was last year or the year before. Fathom Events released on Halloween the original Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi. Yes, I love that one. Yes, so it's so good. Yeah, I went to the movie theater to see it. There was Dracula in theaters again from 1930. So this is like an 80-year-old movie. And people, of course, were laughing at the bat on the string and all the cheesy effects. The very obvious bat on the string. But there was a moment where like people were kind of chuckling along with it and the staginess of the blocking and everything. But there was a moment where Bela Lugosi looks at Van Helsing and says, I'm not going to do a good impression, but come here. And then, like, the silence went over the audience, just from Bela Lugosi's presence. Even the magic is still there. There was something there, just like everyone was like laughing, and then suddenly, like, oh shit, Dracula. Like, serious now. Dracula means business. Yeah, and, I mean, like, it's Bela Lugosi, like that's the Dracula. 80 years later, an audience of mostly like young people that were it seemed like they were there to laugh at it. I kind of felt bad because I love classic movies and movies from that era. Oh yeah. And but I think a lot of younger generations, of course, don't appreciate that, and they were there to kind of mock it. But at that moment, like everyone was like, oh. There is something. They realized, here. And but to go on, like the idea of something being more horrific, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is Tobe Hooper, R.I.P. just died last year. That's right. From 1974, is still the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the goriest movie. That's what when you talk about a gory horror movie, you say Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's what people still think of. There's very little gore on screen in that movie. It's true. A brilliant film. It's just, a lot of it was because they couldn't afford it, and it was such a low budget film. If you can't fake it, it's actually scarier to have it. And it was so much atmosphere, just like going into that house and all the room with all the bones and like the bones of the dead bird in the cage and just the atmosphere that they created. And going back to Snuff, people used that term. Yes. Her life was snuffed out. His life was snuffed out. So people were already very familiar, and it was kind of actually an old-fashioned. Yeah, it was like an old gangster term. Yeah, it's like an old-timey, snuffing someone out. So when people saw that as the film title, they knew what it meant. Yeah. Which is why I think part of why it picked up so quickly, snuff films.
And then just when all this controversy around it and like, oh, this is the movie they don't want you to see. So of course everyone was like, oh shit, we got to see this movie.
We got to see this movie.
Because it is playing to, and that's kind of the whole idea of this is our fascination with death and horror and things that are forbidden, like those, just the darkest aspects of human nature.
Like they always say that, you know, people can't avoid looking at a car accident when they drive past it, which I can because I don't want to get in a car accident. I'm like,
yes.
All you assholes are looking over there, and I'm the only one looking at the damn road.
That causes more accidents.
I'm that person. Like, look at the road. Eyes in front.
And so the idea of a snuff film seemed very plausible, that it did exist.
Of course, yeah.
And there are rumors that there are these companies that make these films for very... And there are stories you hear of celebrities that they were at some party, some huge
they saw a
thing,
snuff
and
film,
there was a back room where there were some people in there, and they were seeing a snuff film.
Well, according to Snopes.com, the claim is that films are routinely made for entertainment purposes in which participants are murdered on camera. Snopes, they call this false. They say that there's never really been... kind of the same thing I said, that we've never found snuff films.
There's
Nobody's
not a
really
documented
ever been
case
indicted.
Of finding one.
Al Goldstein, who's a publisher of Screw Magazine, he has a standing offer for $1 million for anyone who can come up with a commercially sold snuff film. But here's the thing. Of course, there's not a commercially sold snuff film. Because if you were murdering somebody on screen, regardless of if you're doing it for profit or not, you still committed a murder, and you don't want to be like, hi, let's put this in theaters. There's a crime committed. So I think it's kind of stupid when people say that in order for it to be a true snuff film, it has to be commercially sold. So according to, you know, what it seems like Snopes is going off of here is there's no commercially sold snuff films, which
that we know
everybody knows that. Yeah, that we know about it. I feel like, you know, with the internet, we would have found that by now.
I feel like it might be possible. Like, I'm not 100% saying, oh, it's an urban legend, that kind of stuff.
Of course, I think it's definitely possible. I don't think it's necessarily possible in the United States.
Well, not made in the United States.
No, not made in the United States.
To plug your other show, Campfire Curmudgeon,
that's true,
and to plug myself, because I was the guest on that show, we talked about the Satanism in Hollywood and
the Satanic Panic, and
but we got into that idea
Illuminati.
Of the Illuminati. Sort of in that episode, we talked about it more. Ironically, because it's a lot of bullshit, but we also talked about how there really is these very wealthy people who they have everything. What can they do to just get their kicks that they can do?
They have to go
everything.
to something more extreme.
Something
it's like
more
people
extreme,
that start taking drugs that are the type of person that needs a stronger high and a stronger high. And also it's that thing of, if you get somebody on video doing something bad, you have that held over them forever.
Right.
They are completely under your control.
So yeah, I think it is feasible that these things could exist on those levels of just the high top echelon wealthy people. It's possible. So
if you consider snuff films to be a form of pornography, or like snuff pornography, if you consider it, somebody made the video and put it up on express.co.uk, there is actually a claim. The title of this article is "Police Did Nothing to Track Down Victim of Child Porn Snuff Film." So this does claim that there is a video in which this is going to be graphic, warning. I'm sure by the time you've listened, you get here, but we are going to start talking a little bit more in depth about some videos that are out there that may be disturbing to some people. Viewer discretion.
And also, Heidi's grandparents are here.
No, they're not on this episode. They won't be listening to this one. Viewer discretion advised strongly. But in this film was actually seized. There was a raid on a Latvian man, his house in Skelmersdale, Lancashire. And they knew he was somebody who had child pornography, so that's why they raided his home. But amongst that, they found what appears to be a young teenage girl begging a man not to hurt her. She's raped. She is strangled with a wire. She foams at the mouth. Her eyes roll back. Then she is wrapped in plastic. This is where people who have seen it, police officers and things, say they do not believe that it was fake, because she was wrapped in plastic for so long to where if she was faking an actress, she would have needed to breathe. You would have seen like the plastic fogging up. You would have seen her sucking the plastic in and out. That didn't happen. So they do actually believe that this snuff film was created. The individual that had this, he was sentenced to 22. He was 22 years old. He was sentenced to 8 months in jail for possessing that film.
8 months?
Just 8 months.
Jesus.
Yes. And the judge who saw this, he even said, I guess part of it was they showed parts of this film at his trial. He said, yes, she was probably killed. Everyone who has seen the film said, yes, she was probably killed. She's believed to be American based off of her accent. And people are pretty upset. So this obviously happened in Lancashire. This is in Britain. People were upset.
What year was this?
This was 2014.
Oh,
I thought
recently.
it was 14 or 13. Yeah, not that long ago. People were pretty upset that this was written 15 months after this, and they were saying, have you done anything to trace the victim and the filmmaker?
Yeah.
People were kind of upset that there was this video of this girl on film who everyone who watches it says, yeah, she was probably killed. And they were like, okay, well, are you actually doing this? So this could be considered proof that a snuff film. However, we still, as far as I could tell, there was no follow-up article to this about them finding the victim or the filmmaker. So we do not know if you can even call it a film, obviously.
Yeah.
If the person really was killed, no.
If you believe the legend, like the reason why there was no follow-up is because powerful people in England, around the world, are connected to it, and they suppressed it.
And this article says, and I've heard elsewhere that unfortunately in the UK they don't have as sophisticated software that we have. Like we have some of the facial recognition. We have a huge bank of child victims that we can match up now. And they were saying, why was this not given to the Americans to do their magic with and see if they can come up with, whether or not this actually was an individual that was killed, So a lot of people were really upset about that. And to this day, they believe that this is a real snuff film.
Sounds possible. But there were also, and the book Killing for Culture gets into this too, there was an entire genre of these really extreme underground videos that were fake snuff films.
True.
That were released. They were effects, they were fake, they were all actors, but there was a market. Like this was back before the internet and anything. There were catalogs where you could buy these videos that looked like very realistic rape and murder, and it wasn't real.
There is a market for that.
Yeah, there still is a market. But yeah, just you can thumb through a catalog and order these things. But they are made by filmmakers. They're special effects. They're actors. So that was a thing that was happening as well, which is just as troubling, I think, kind of like.
It's that thing when I worked investigating different types of fraud that went through financial systems. So anytime somebody was paying for something that we thought a crime was attached to, part of what I had to do was investigate it. And unfortunately, we would investigate child pornography, things like that. One of the things that we would investigate is, they're sex dolls. Yeah. Unfortunately, there were sex dolls that were made to look like children and or babies. And they were not accidentally designed. They were not designed to look young. They were designed to look like children. And one day we all began talking about that because that was something that was an offense that we could actually file reports on. That was an offense that actually possessing one in certain states could get somebody jail time. It was this weird gray area.
Because there's also been a debate that that is something that's actually preferable, creating these sex dolls for pedophiles so that they don't go after actual children.
And that's what we had talked about. We were discussing, is it awful that these exist? Yes, and it is, but is it better than them raping an actual child? However, because we had this discussion, some of us did some research, and we actually found out that according to different researchers, they found that this would not make somebody less likely to offend. In fact, there are claims that it could potentially make somebody more likely because the fantasy is becoming more and more real, which makes them just want the real thing even more. So it's kind of that gray area with certain types of pornography.
Yeah, exactly. That is this an outlet?
Is it an outlet, or is it something that's dangerous?
Something that's going to cause? And I think that's something. Just my opinion. Boils down to the individual involved.
Absolutely. It's the whole video game thing.
Right.
When people say video games cause violence, I think that's absolutely bullshit. If that were true, I mean...
Yeah, violence would be so
it would
much
be
more widespread.
Everywhere. It's like... It definitely depends. There are
some
kids...
some people
especially young kids. There are some kids that if you let them watch violent movies or play a violent video game, they're going to act out. When I was a kid, we lived next door to this kid, and his parents let him watch Power Rangers, and he would try to fight people all the time. My brother and I was a little bit older than this boy. My brother was a little bit younger. We both watched Power Rangers, and we didn't go around trying to kick the other neighborhood kids in the head. It was just a matter of...
He was just a fucked up kid.
Yeah, it was just... That's how he was going to interpret it. And that's the thing is...
It's also like, David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, he committed those murders because his neighbor's dog told him to.
Apparently.
Like, anyone's going to find a reason. If someone who's going to do something like
they're
that, they're going to
find
a reason.
But I think a lot of what people say, though, is making pornography that depicts things like rape or that depicts things like, murders, does that make a market for it? Because does that make it harder to find the real stuff? Does that make it easier to hide? Because when you have so many different things that are filmed to look, especially if you're on a porn site where you're not seeing the whole video, you're seeing clips and you're seeing clip after clip after clip of what looks like actual rape, does that make it a lot easier to slip in a clip of somebody actually being raped and you wouldn't know the difference? And that's where it leads to that thing of like movies like Snuff, although not, terribly well made. That one
specifically, yeah.
But movies like that, do they encourage and create this atmosphere where it's easier and
is someone, some disturbed person going to discover like, oh, that's a thing?
Exactly. Are they going to watch that?
I want to seek this out.
Yeah, and the video that I was talking about, I actually have a quote from Detective Constable Edward Wenham, and he was the lead investigator. Here's the interesting thing, though, the way he's describing it. When you hear some of the other people or read some of the other people describe it, it seems like it could be very real. But from this description he gives, I'm not sure if it seems staged. Here's why. It's already being filmed. So we're already watching something being filmed. It's a man in his 40s decorating. First off, weird.
What, men in their 40s aren't allowed to decorate?
Oh, absolutely. I encourage them to. It's just not usual, and it's not something you generally film. Yeah, unless you're filming it for YouTube purposes or to show somebody, generally you don't, when we think of things that we film, it's not, I'm not going to film myself decorating. Unless...
I don't know. I for 6 years, I worked for a company where we digitized
that's
home movies. And part of my job was scanning through these home movies, checking for picture quality. People, I've seen things. is all I'm going to say.
That's true.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but I love this story so much. Okay. My favorite video I ever saw, I think I've told you about this, the bachelorette party.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
So this was an actual video I got at work. It was a bachelorette party, and it started normal enough. They were in Australia, but they all spoke French for some reason. I don't know why. So I couldn't understand anything they were saying. It was all in French. So a bachelorette party, normal thing. All the ladies get together. They're going to different wine bars. They're getting progressively drunker and drunker, and it's just a goofy, it's a bachelorette party. And then at some point...
You're expecting maybe somebody to flash the camera or something, and then...
Yeah. And then they're in a field... in a pentagram, standing in a pentagram with candles and in robes, like pointy-headed robes.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Reading something from scrolls. Like they're performing an occult ritual, and they're all hammered. And so, it was one of the weirdest things I'd ever seen.
How successful do you think that ritual was?
They were having a hard time getting through it because they were stumbling over and laughing and things. And then it ended up back at the, I think the bride-to-be's house. And the way the video ended, they're all fucking sloshed.
That is so funny.
And the bride is tied naked to a chair, and someone's walking around with a whip. And that's where the video ended. And they filmed that.
It's a good story to lighten things up a little bit. The funniest thing I ever saw, I worked for a company where I worked in a copy center. We would make copies of different things. People would often bring in whole photo albums that they would want us to scan in a digital form. And there was this photo. This person had to be like being goofy on purpose. They look like they have like marshmallows or some sort of fake teeth, and they're like making the most awkward pose. The person that dropped off the photo album was still in the store wandering around, and the person I worked with, she and I were kind of scanning through it, and I was like, oh my god, come here. I pull her over. I'm like, Missy, check this out. And she and I both like bust up laughing to where we didn't want this lady to see us, so we both drop behind one of our giant copy machines, and we're just there like like trying so hard not to laugh, and we hear somebody was like, hello. We're like, oh, we're just fixing a paper jam, and we were just like trying so hard not to laugh. I might have taken a picture of that picture, and it might be up.
Get you in trouble. You probably signed something. So
I didn't.
Maybe you should have cut.
No, absolutely, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Because I did sign something I probably shouldn't.
It's going to be on the Facebook.
Okay.
This one is going to be on the Facebook.
Okay, great.
But, give you a little laughter before we get real dark here. I'm going to describe what Detective Constable Edward Wenham says he saw. He describes a man in his 40s decorating, goatee and a beard, but you could still see his face very clearly, so they have a clear view of who this individual is. A young girl comes into the room, and she asks him for money to go to cheerleading camp. It says the girl was white. It was apparent that the man was either her father or stepfather. I don't know what race the father is. They never describe that.
Yeah,
but
they specified that she's white.
It makes me wonder.
If they don't say what he is, yeah.
I wonder if that's, they're just hoping somebody is missing a white girl that was living with a stepfather.
The unfortunate thing that if it's a white girl, more people are going to care.
Yeah, I wonder if that's that could also be
which is horrible, but that's the reality of the situation.
It's very strange to specify. But he says that the man began to shout obscenities, and then he sexually abuses her. So this is when he rapes her, and then he strangles her. And as he's strangling her, he sexually abuses her again, potentially to the point of her passing out. That's when he lays out a clear plastic sheet, and he lays the body on it. Then he wraps it very tightly. So this is where they're saying it takes about 3 minutes for him to finish wrapping her, and she's wrapped in plastic this entire time. Even people that can hold their breath for a long time, I'm sure there's much longer than 3 minutes is what the record is. I don't know. We can look it up. But the majority of people I do not think could hold their breath for 3 minutes and act dead for 3 minutes while holding your breath. He said if it was acting, it was better than an Oscar-winning performance. Her eyes didn't blink or move at all, which you can't really keep yourself from blinking for 3 minutes. So it appears it seems apparent that she was dead, but the strange thing about it is it seems very staged. So at the very least, if it was a true...
That beginning part, so she's asking for money for cheerleading camp.
And he just happens to have plastic. It doesn't seem like he had to go find it. It seems very quickly. At the very least, if it was a true snuff film, he was prepared for it and intended on creating this film, which is scary.
The cheerleading thing is kind of a factor that really gives me pause.
To me...
Because it's like, who are they trying to appeal to with this video? If it were fake,
it seems
it would be
very
someone
much
that,
like the beginning of a porn.
Yes, it does.
Like,
how is he going to pay for this pizza? Or it's
exactly. It's like,
it seems too much of a setup.
That's what I'm thinking. But at the same time, it does seem strange that I'm sure this detective constable. I'm sure he's had to see things like this. And if he's saying she looked dead, usually a cop is a pretty good person to ask if somebody looks dead or not. So it's very strange. Unfortunately, they don't have any more information on that. So this actually seems to me like one of the most compelling pieces of evidence to actual snuff film being made. Along those lines, I'm sure you've heard of Luca Magnata and One Lunatic, One Ice Pick video. What do you know?
Well, before that, with the internet, things, like I said, this book was published in 1995, and it's a fascinating read, but things have changed completely with the internet, with the availability and technology, video technology.
Well, we can talk about, so before the internet, how would people get these snuff films? How would they get their hands on them?
Through underground channels. There were catalogs apparently where you can order these things. So
before VHS, a lot of this, like you said, it was celebrities claiming that
had actual film
you had to go
reels,
to a party, or you had to go to someone's house, you had to go into an event. And that's something that I feel like, it's not so easy as just copying a VHS. It's not something that's widespread, so if one person says they saw it, you may never see any evidence of that.
Pornography at the time was because I actually my ex and I developed we built a large collection of 8mm pornography.
Oh, interesting.
And we had we still have it, a projector that was from 1959, just a beautiful machine.
I love old projectors.
This one is superb. But we had a large collection of 8mm. It was an 8mm projector.
Oh my gosh!
Pornography.
Was it commercially made, or was it homemade, or both?
Something in between.
Something in between.
These were not like home movies of.
But these were the early commercial, as
I guess you would say
much
they were
as you could call them commercial.
Some of them, we had some that did have titles,
and did have. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and but other ones, and they varied from like hardcore. There's one where it's basically a woman undressing, and there's not even any nudity in it. She just undresses into lingerie and then puts on a nice robe.
Oh, that's so funny. That's kind of cute.
And it's kind of sweet. This little video, and it's naughty. It's not hardcore. And we did have some of the more hardcore stuff as well.
And that's kind of the stuff that you would see maybe playing at parties where people would be...
Stag parties. That was an actual thing where, especially at like bachelor parties back in the early part of the 20th century, they would put up a sheet and they would get one of these old projectors and they would show these films. And that was just a thing. But there are stories, and again, this is kind of like a snuff film, but there are stories that there were certain filmmakers, especially ones that were involved with the occult, that would make very specialty porn films for wealthy people. They had very specific things they wanted to see, and they would hire these filmmakers who were artists to create this, to basically put their fantasy on film. And this film was made... This one film was made, there's one copy, and it was made for and is owned by this one person who was wealthy enough to have it made.
To own it. So unless you were somebody that knew this one or both individuals and had viewed it. And
maybe they would have parties at their house where they would invite certain friends that they trust.
Exactly.
Like, I have this thing, let's go into the back room. The rest of the party is over there.
They may have not even told them what they were about to see.
Yes.
That's not something that you can, find commercially or find all over the internet like now. So that would be a lot harder to know if these types of films were being made pre-internet, pre-VHS even, where it's like there may not be a single other copy.
Right, exactly.
Somebody may own the one copy and may have even destroyed that one copy after viewing it so many times to where it's very hard to prove whether or not that was real.
Yeah.
And then once VHS came along, it was much easier for one film to be copied over and over. It was portable. It was a way that people could pass it to each other.
And then when the internet came along, if VHS was an explosion, the internet is just a massive, it's
even bigger
everywhere.
Explosion. Yes.
And there's so many, even before we get to the specific horrible case, there are gore sites.
Oh, absolutely.
There are sites, and I've seen them. I don't like them. I do not condone what's on there. There are people that are into this kind of stuff. Like, I'm into dark, weird shit, and these make me uncomfortable.
I wouldn't say they make me uncomfortable. Again, this was something that there are certain videos that I had to view in doing my job.
Yes.
So and that's the interesting thing.
And most of them are accident videos.
Well, what I saw was, and this is that thing where we were talking about, is like a beheading video snuff. Well, I saw them being sold, so you could consider that at that point a snuff film.
Yeah, there was a company that I used to buy bootleg, they call it gray market, movies, mainstream movies, mostly like, because I'm really big into Italian exploitation films from the 60s and 70s. That's kind of
stuff
my thing.
you couldn't find,
yes,
you would
that
buy through this company.
was not commercially available. If it were, I would buy it through their companies.
Yes, like, you're a big proponent of buying things the right way, so this is interesting that you would.
I am. But there are certain titles
you just couldn't get
by filmmakers that just the rights issues were tied up and stuff, and so there aren't DVD companies putting out a special edition Blu-ray of this. And once they do, I'm totally getting that. But until then, I want to see this film. And so there was this website that would sell these films, and you could buy them. And one of the titles they had that, like, I really loved this. I'm not going to name it. I think they're gone now, but
probably.
They shut down for a while. I don't know if they ever came back. I know they periodically were shut down for copyright reasons.
Of course.
But one of the things that they offered in their catalog was the footage of from the Twilight Zone movie. The segment directed by John Landis, where actor Vic Morrow and the two kids, John Landis went against safety codes and were shooting a scene with a helicopter.
Yes.
And where the actor Vic Morrow and the two children were decapitated by the blades. There was a mistake with an explosion. It threw off the helicopter's trajectory. The blade came down and killed them.
Yes, I've seen this video. You can readily find it online now, and it's not even something you have to look for. And that's the other thing is, I've seen all sorts of things that you weren't even looking for. I mean, scrolling through Facebook, I saw a man torn apart by a machine somewhere where he worked. And it's kind of like, I mean, I know some people are really bothered by it. To me, I was just like, that would be a real shitty way to go. But what I also think about is, what if that was my loved one or my friend? I'd be fucking pissed. I would hunt down whoever put that video up, and I would, treat them the same way.
Let's face it, teenage boys.
Yeah,
who are trying to freak each other out by,
like, dude, can you look at this? And it's just like,
oh, look at that. Oh, he's got, there's a video I saw that was, and this is even just a natural thing. Someone had a snapping turtle in a tank, and they dropped a mouse in.
Yeah.
And which is how you would feed a snapping turtle.
That's how you feed them, yeah.
That's what they eat. But it bit it in half, and then you saw the top half still trying to swim away.
Yes.
As its entrails were hanging out, and then it goes after and gets the second half, and that's a part of nature, really. I mean, it was in a tank, but it was filmed, and I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw this.
Oof. Yeah, see, so, I'm careful with that because, I mean, it's a mouse. I'm not too concerned, but we're not going to talk about it too much because it makes me really mad. But there are snuff films of animals.
Yes.
This
will get us to Luca.
One of those people. I know we're going to brush over it because it makes me absolutely want to nail him to a wall, literally.
Yeah.
I can't. That's the funny thing is I've had to see stuff for work. I've come across things, and they don't bother me as much as animals, especially animals that I consider cute. Not a cow or anything. I'm one of those people that people are like, oh, you're a hypocrite. I'm like, well, I eat cows. I don't feel bad for cows. I won't own a cow as a pet, and I'm not going to allow a cow into my house. But animals that I find cute and furry and would have in my house, I do not want to see killed at all. I don't buy fur at all for that reason. If I buy leather, I try to make sure it's from an animal that I consume or that is consumed in the region it's from, and it's something that I would consume. I don't like fox or wolf or anything like that because those are all animals I would have as a pet, which maybe, I mean, obviously you shouldn't, right. But you know what I mean? They're animals that I feel a connection to or that I like. So that kind of thing, I'm just like, I can't.
Like, have you ever seen?
It's very upsetting to me.
Like I'm way against animal cruelty and think wildlife should be preserved. Unfortunately, politically, the way the country's going, that's becoming less of a thing. But have you heard of the giant salamander?
I have.
That thing needs to die. Like, no, okay. So this thing, it's a salamander, but they can grow up to 6 feet long.
They can get very large.
And they live in Japan and in China. And
I think so. A few other places.
No, fucking kill that thing. That if you believe in God, God made a mistake.
He
created, nature made a mistake. This thing should not exist. That's my one. Nature is beautiful, and all of the creatures of the world are amazing, except for that one.
Well, and the thing is too, even animals that I don't like I don't care about cows and I eat them. I don't want to watch somebody kill one for fun.
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen a cow slaughtered for food purposes at my high school, actually.
Yeah.
But that's different because they weren't like, hey, we're killing this cow. They were like, this is how we make food.
Yeah.
When you
human beings are omnivores, and most human beings are carnivores as well. So
a good amount of people.
Like
and
the video with the snapping turtle. Am I angry at the snapping turtle?
No,
because it's doing what it does. It's eating its food.
Yeah, but I don't particularly like watching those types of videos because to me, a lot of the people that are filming them for either like a "ooh, look how cool I am" effect, or because they're enjoying this animal's pain. And to me, it's like, why don't you pick on something your own size? Yeah. Like, let's get in a boxing ring with me, honey, and we'll see how well you do. Little edgelord.
I said once with because I'm not a hunter. I'm not judging people that do hunt. It's just not my thing.
No.
And but one time my ex, I met her family, and they're very big into hunting and stuff. And one time we were out in the desert with them over Thanksgiving, which it was a very odd Thanksgiving.
That sounds like
fun.
An odd Thanksgiving.
Yes.
You were out in the desert. All right.
Yes. We were out in the middle of nowhere in the Arizona desert where they live. That's where we had Thanksgiving. There's aspects of it I won't get into that were even scarier. But,
oh my!
There was a moment where they were out there with guns. They were shooting. But
be safe.
Yeah, but at one point they were just out wandering the desert with guns, and a rabbit came out, and my ex's stepbrother just blasted it with a shotgun, and he was so proud that he had killed this rabbit. A
tiny bunny.
He's like, oh, it just came out, and I just. My reflexes were so fat. Like, he was so proud. And it's like, you had a shotgun and it was a rabbit. Like, if you were fast enough, you could have kicked it to death.
People like that, I just want to be like, hey, set the gun down, and then just spin around and back kick him straight in the face and be like, did you see how fast my reflexes were?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I just want to be like, let me prove to you why that wasn't awesome.
Yeah.
Like, it makes me, I get like this weird anger reflex where I'm just like, I'm going to tear you limb from limb with my bare hands.
Like,
that's awesome.
If you came out of the jungle, like you went alone to the jungle with a knife and fought a tiger.
Yeah, or even if you had killed the rabbit for food.
Yes.
Like my grandfather, you heard him on my last episode. He talked a little bit about growing up poor. What he didn't really get into is they were so poor that sometimes if you wanted food, you caught it. And it was rabbits, it was birds, it was squirrels even out where they lived.
And that's surviving.
And that's completely different. He took no joy in that. It wasn't like, oh, cool. And if you were excited, you were excited because you got dinner.
Yes.
It wasn't like, oh, I killed that thing.
In this case, he took joy in the fact that he blew this thing to smithereens.
Yeah, if you hunt and you hunt for food and you use every part of that and you take the rest to a processing facility where they use the rest of it, that's fine. If you're hunting for fun, for trophies, I don't.
Or not even for trophies. He just blew it to pieces.
I don't like it. No.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure I said a bunch of weird stuff that weekend, but that would have gotten me in trouble because I was in the middle of nowhere in Arizona with these wackos. But
I have no chill, and I probably would have been like, let me tell you exactly why you're a piece of shit.
At one point, like, I was trying to explain why, like, they asked if I liked hunting, and like, no, I don't really, not into it. And they asked why, and I said, well, if you can't hunt people, what's the point? Like, that's not really fair. Like, when you're hunting a deer...
Yeah, it doesn't have a gun to fight back.
Yeah, and then that's such a point of pride as they killed this deer. And, like, again, at my job, I saw little girls do that.
Yeah, you're like, I'm secure enough in a manhood that I don't need to shoot things.
And then I shot a gun, and I felt nothing when I shot.
Yes.
They handed me a handgun, and they said, oh, there were some targets and stuff. They were shooting at targets at that
Sometimes
point.
It can be quite cathartic.
And for some people, see, I didn't
when I got
feel
laid
that.
off, I went shooting, and I was like, yes,
and
right in the target. Take that. And it was nice, but
I can understand that. But
I
like,
could do
they
without
put a gun
it
in my
easily.
hand, which I didn't grow up around guns.
Oh,
and so I was holding a gun.
Like,
and it's like,
thanks.
Okay, and then it's like, oh, the target's over there.
Jeez, that's
and
not
then
how
I
you
just
do
went,
it.
I pointed and
You're
just
like,
shot, and then
I guess I'll just shoot this. Yeah,
and then my ear went.
Ooh.
And it was like, oh, because I didn't grow up around
or anything.
I hadn't. Everyone else had put them in. I didn't grow up around guns, so I didn't know that. So I was just like, oh, here's a gun, shoot at that target. I'm like, oh, okay, and I shot it, and then it's like, okay, I fucking hate guns because they hurt my ears.
They do,
and
yeah.
Like that's.
I've gone out shooting in the desert with friends, and that was actually much better than in a shooting range. I do not like being in a shooting range, because I have adrenaline issues, and so my senses can get heightened. So when I am surrounded by all of the ricocheting of guns, Plus, I know that when my adrenaline is heightened, like, I could get hit by a ricochet bullet and not know it. So every sound, I'm just like, oh God, oh God, oh God. Like, every time I'm just like, did I get shot?
I can see that, yeah.
I absolutely hate it. It sends me into, like, a weird panic, and I'm just like, I have to really, like, focus on me, my gun, shooting my target, and then I can kind of, like, drown it out. But it's not something that I enjoy. Like, people that are just like, I love being surrounded by that. I'm just like... Yeah. I could do without that.
It does nothing for me.
That weird violence. And I think, it's that thing, like we were talking about, a lot of the people that upload these kinds of videos are the same kind of people that want to own guns and want to talk about how edgy and how cool they are. And I think that's what gets us to Luca Magnata.
Yes.
What do you know about Luca?
He was a gay porn star and male escort.
He also... dated and slept with and filmed women as well with him.
Yes.
So we could call him bi. He did not identify as gay, I don't believe.
Well, I think the types of cinema he was making.
Yes, a lot of the films he made were...
and we're not even judging people that do that. That's a business.
No, absolutely not. But
in this guy's case... he invited, also he was making things that, like you were saying, you don't like. He was posting videos online of him killing kittens.
Yes, which...
I mean, how evil do you have to fucking be to where your thing is, I post videos where I kill kittens? I would nail
his dick to his table.
Yes.
100%. He had an aunt who described him as a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. From the time he was young, I guess family members of his saw something was fucking weird. Classmates remembered him. They said that he used to tell funny stories. He always wanted to be the center of attention. He even tried to get on a plastic surgery show.
Yes, yeah. He was tried to be a reality show star.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Already, I will judge those people. If you want to be on a reality show, you have psychological issues.
Well, I mean, a lot of those people, too, are just actors.
Yeah.
I have friends that are actors, and they get,
that's different.
They get stuff to their email, and it's like, they look into it, and they're like, is this a reality show? So a lot of the things people are watching, those are all actors.
I've worked in
there's scripts.
The entertainment industry, and they used to say...
Yeah, exactly.
They used to say reality is just industry slang for non-union.
Yeah, it's just scripted. But
they're called story editors, writers of reality show. They're story producers.
Yes,
that's the title, is story producer. You're a writer of a reality show.
But he really wanted to be the center of attention.
Yeah.
Early crimes, he was accused of stealing his girlfriend's credit card. He bought a bunch of TVs, DVD players, phones with it. He got 9 months jail for that. He was also charged with sexual assault, but she dropped those charges. So probably because she was scared shitless of him and knew he was only, he wasn't going to be in forever. He's one of these fucking piece of shit edgelords that we're talking about that just wanted to be the center of attention. And additionally, he probably did need some form of help, psychiatric help. He had a lover who it's described here as a transsexual cabaret performer. Nina Arsenault was her name. And she said that he would become so angry, he would punch himself in the head. So he seems to be, not only is he enacting violence on animals and people, but also himself. And if perhaps he does that to himself, maybe he doesn't, there's something wrong there where he doesn't see what he's doing as so awful. But at the same time, fuck him. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He was posting the animal abuse to gore sites, and people were like, that's not cool. Like, even
these are people that are going to gore sites.
They are going to gore sites. And
they thought this guy was too much.
If you want to know about, who watches this stuff, at www.theverge.com, they have an article titled Snuff, Murder and Torture on the Internet and the People Who Watch It. One of the people on here who is actually, I believe, like a moderator of one of these websites, I'm not sure if it was bestgore.com or one like that. She was a trauma nurse, like an ER nurse. She watched these films in order to desensitize herself, which I can see that. She wanted to be able to see anything and not be grossed out, not be scared, not be upset, just be able to help the person. So, I mean, I can see that. Yeah. That is interesting. But there are people that watch it purely for I guess, pleasure. Unfortunately,
Yes,
some people
pleasure.
have it, it's mixed with the sexuality. Some people watch it as a means of testing themselves, kind of
Yes.
like a modern day, like, like trial, or it's like they want to have a way to like prove something to themselves, which, I mean,
because they live their lives in these boring office jobs where they're underappreciated and they're just, they feel like shit, and then they feel like they should be some gladiator in an arena or something.
Then go, go do some sports thing.
Yeah,
go sports ball.
Go sports ball, yeah.
Right.
But instead they go to these sites and it's like, oh, I can watch this, and they get off on it. There is a sexual component to it.
And, like I mentioned earlier, I think these sites are extremely problematic because these people dying have families and friends.
Yeah.
And
a lot of them also, if you look at them, they're very racist too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of them have like these weird racist agendas.
Yes, absolutely.
That goes beyond just
look at what these kinds of people do.
Yeah.
It's those videos like, oh, look at this person, look at their kind, and it's those kind of videos. So I don't agree with these websites. I am going to cite some of them because that's where
they're on the internet.
They're on the internet.
Out there.
Some of these facts, if you want to get some facts about Luca Magnata without seeing any bad images, I'm scrolling through real quick. Yeah.
This guy gets worse in this story.
He does. It's mirror.co.uk. So if you want to go, the Mirror, they have a really good in-depth article on him where they have some quotes from people that knew him. But go ahead and tell us what you know about Luca.
Okay, so what he's known for mostly is he had a lover, I guess, who was a Chinese exchange student.
Yes, well, and it's not really known whether or not this person was involved with him very much, or if, I believe this might have been the first time he met him. So they might have had an exchange online, but I believe this was the first time that he met him in person. The victim's name, I'm going to say it because it's out there and it's very well known, is Lin Jun. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, or Lin Jun. This individual is the one who met Luca Magnata and became his victim.
Yes. He murdered him, filmed it, and then posted the videos online.
He did, and one of the places that, in fact, I believe the first place he posted it is bestgore.com. This website is very graphic. I'm going to say extreme viewer discretion. If you choose to go to this website, the One Lunatic, One Ice Pick video is no longer up.
Yeah.
That was the video Luca Magnata made.
Even these gore sites had to pull these videos.
They were actually ordered by police,
yes.
Canadian police. But there is a very graphic image, so be very careful if you're going to bestgore.com or if you are searching One Lunatic, One Ice Pick, because I'm sure the video is still out there.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find it. The sad thing too is like this bestgore.com. There are some of these weird people that are into these gore sites, and they're like, oh, bestgore.com. That's like the McDonald's of gore sites. That's like the mainstream. So I'm into the real cool shit.
Well, and some of the stuff on these sites, a lot of it's like, accidents, horrible work accidents.
Car accidents.
They have topics. You can find beheading videos. You can find Latin America wars. You can find road accidents, robbery, sexual disaster. Obviously, that's probably rape. Oof. You can find torture, war in Iraq, workplace accidents, suicide, street fights, stonings. I really don't agree with these being out here. Dash cam videos.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that, again, maybe some of these war videos that are in different countries, they seem so far away and so distant that sometimes people can view them as like, whoa, did you watch his head get blown off, or did you watch him get beheaded? But what we don't think of is, even though this person dresses and looks extremely different from us and doesn't speak the same language, they still do have a family, and I guarantee they have at least one person that cares about them. So that's what I want to keep in mind, because I don't want people to hear this and then go, to fall down the rabbit hole.
This is not a recommendation.
We're not recommending this, but
if you're writing this down, these websites down as you're listening to this, we don't want to know you.
No, that's why, like I said, I was like, hi, internet service provider. I'm not. This is for research.
Yeah.
But so, like I said, if you search this, you'll find images. At the very least, they were not ordered for some reason to take the still images down, but they were forced to take down the video. When this video first came out, people didn't think it was real because along with that list of things that I gave you, there was also a lot of these are fake. So some of these videos that are people, supposedly being murdered and this and that, a lot of them on here are fake and people know they are fake. Mm-hmm. So when this came out, people thought it was fake until some people started researching. They were like, holy shit, is this that guy that killed the kittens? Mm-hmm. And people were already like, fuck this guy. When people realized that, they're like, he's kind of a psycho. Like when people asked him, they said, stop, take these down. He posted more. And he even was like, fuck you, I'll do what I want, kind of. Yeah. He posted them in response. He was like, I'm posting these because you told me not to. These kittens died because you told me not to. So people were like, he's a sick enough fuck to where this could be real. And after people viewed this, that for a hobby, view these videos, they started to realize that this might be different. The fucked up thing is this was actually on here for quite some time before anybody notified the police. I don't know how
he was long. Also he cut off because he dismembers the body.
He does.
And he cut off the feet and the hands and mailed them to elementary schools.
Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah, that was a thing he did too.
That was I think actually that was when the video was reported.
I think so, yeah.
Once the body parts were found, somebody put 2 and 2 together and figured out that the video they saw of somebody taking a body apart, because at first they thought that the murder was faked, and they thought that maybe this was somebody that had access to dead bodies, like a medical student or something. They thought it was like kind of like a prank or like just somebody trying to make the best video. They thought that it was just somebody cutting up already dead bodies that they had access to.
Yeah.
Which that's still a red flag. If somebody is cutting up dead bodies and they have access to them, they probably
shouldn't have
they
access.
They probably shouldn't be allowed to chop them up. Just saying, you should probably report that anyways. But this was pretty graphic. So it's filmed in a dimly lit room. We see the victim tied to the bed, and he is stabbed over and over with an ice pick. Then we see his throat slashed, and later on we do see the body being dismembered. So because of the way it was filmed, and because of the fact that there were cuts in the film, so it was like the murder.
Right.
And then later it was bits and pieces of the bits and pieces.
Yeah. And there are ways you can tell if something's fake through the cuts, through the placement of the camera. You can see where they had to make a cut and change the camera position in order to disguise an effect.
That's what people thought was happening at first, until they started watching it, and they were like, I don't think so. He ate some of this individual, and people were just like, this doesn't seem right. I mean, we're not going to totally go into this because it gets pretty disturbing. Yeah. And I mean, we could read it, but
well, it hasn't so far. This has been fine.
I know. Well, I mean, we could read it for you, but you might want to turn it off at that point. So we're not going to get super graphic. If you want, like I said, you can find this. I don't suggest you look for it because you'll probably come across the videos. We're sitting here looking at a picture of, the victim, and it's one of those things where, although it doesn't really bother me that much, it's horrible that this is somebody's loved one, and his family, they do not want these pictures out, which makes me really angry that it's still here. Unfortunately, I'm on this website for, the purpose of research.
This discussion, yeah.
If I was not, I wouldn't ever go on this site, but that's the thing that we have to think about is, people that are looking at these films for, oh, I'm so cool. It's like, what if that was somebody you cared about? And a lot of these people will be like, oh, I don't care about anybody. It's like, you'll grow the fuck up and you will someday. And someday you'll get it. And I hate to be that person because I've heard that so many times, like, someday you'll want children. It's like, no, honey, I won't. But there are some things that I can tell you. Someday you'll care for at least one person, and if not, then
adolescent boy, let's just say it, mentality.
Seriously,
that of one-upmanship, that like,
and even some adolescent girls.
Yeah,
like, I can watch it. It's fine.
I'm saying in with air quotes, because I'm sure there are girls that are just the same. But it is generally a kind of male impulse, I guess. This kind of one-upmanship and pushing yourself to be the edgiest, the most extreme form of yourself you can be by watching things like this.
And at the end, so this was, some people say that, this was a snuff film because of the fact that he made it for a purpose. So maybe he didn't sell this video, but he did make this video for the purpose of infamy, because that's what he wanted. And, you could say that, I'm looking right now and there's ads all over this website for different porn sites and things, and that's making money. So this was on a website. This is a
commercial film.
This was a commercial film. This was a film that is on a website that does generate revenue.
Yeah, so going back to that definition of what is a snuff film, like, I feel like this isn't a snuff film in the idea of the, as I defined it earlier. This is something new. This is something else.
I don't know. He did make it for the express purpose. He did the murder for the purpose of being filmed.
But I think the fact that it was for his pleasure, and the fact that other people are viewing it are like, this is something else, I think, which is
but
maybe even more
there were people that viewed
horrible.
this and did enjoy it.
That's true.
So he did know that there were people out there that would enjoy this.
But I don't think he made it for them. I think he made it for himself.
Kind of. But
again, this is semantics.
Yeah, it's semantics. It's why do people make
horrible,
films?
But I think this is an example of why this book, The Killing for Culture, ended in 95, why they could write another book
exactly
on what happened since 95, things like this. Because this was not possible in 95 or before. This is something of the internet age, and I think this is something, as a culture, as a society, the internet has done so many amazing things for us. So much is possible, but also this is possible now.
So much horrible, yes. It's like, you got to take the good with the bad.
The internet is a tool, and it's only as good as the human beings that are wielding it. And it also gives, as much as so many amazing things could happen with it, the absolute worst of humanity is also using the same tool to forward that.
And that's definitely something that if you are somebody that does go on these gore sites, we're not saying you're a bad person.
No.
If you are somebody that enjoys, I don't even want to say enjoys snuff type films with the idea in mind that they are fake, you do have to keep in mind that, are you adding to that? Are you creating a need? Are you creating a market?
You're creating a market, yeah. Basically,
is that what's happening? And I think people have to be
because human beings
careful.
are awful, and if a market is created, someone's going to show up to fill it.
And that's the thing, is I think with snuff films, sometimes how people are like, oh, they're not real. You get people like Luca Magnata that are like, oh, fucking watch me. Yeah. You get people like that are like, oh, you think they're not real? I'll make them real. Right. So I think we need to be careful sometimes with the way that we're like, this isn't real. This is crazy. We talk things off in a way that it's like dismissive when, I don't want to go all satanic panic on it. You don't want to feel like snuff films everywhere. They're coming for your children.
Of films, yeah.
But I think it is something that we have to keep in mind. And if you see something, say something. Yeah. Honestly, if you come across a video and, you're embarrassed, you're afraid, you think you're going to get in trouble, there are ways that you can contact authorities completely anonymous. Go find a payphone, make a phone call, give them details, and then walk away.
Just say, look at this.
Yeah, take a look.
This disturbed me. Maybe it's fake. Hopefully it's fake.
And if it is fake, they probably already know exactly what it is. They probably already have it. They probably already checked it out, and they'll be able to, you're not going to waste anybody's time. Right. But on the off chance,
if it's not, then it needs to be addressed.
Exactly. This video of Luca, this was up for a very long time.
This was a very real psychopath that did this.
His family was,
horrendous crime.
The victim's family was wondering what happened to him. His friends were wondering, and there were people watching this as enjoyment, and there were people that could have said something earlier and got this, pulled a little bit quicker, and that to me is kind of disappointing. So I think, it's kind of fun to think about ooh, snuff films, people are so dumb that buy into that, the satanic panic. It's kind of funny to think of somebody's auntie with her, panties all in a wad because she thinks that snuff films are everywhere. And it's kind of funny, but we always have to think about, don't forget that there could be real victims out there.
Yeah.
And we have to keep that in mind, that it's weird, it's mysterious, it's creepy, but it's also pretty fucked up, and we want to make sure that we're not contributing to that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a weird line for someone like me to like, when I got this book, I was like, holy shit, like, I need to read this book.
Somebody who's been involved with film.
Yes.
We're going to throw that out there. I'm going to throw you under the bus.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a scene.
Director.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have directed a film. I mean, more than one, but one feature film that is commercially available. There's a scene in the film that I'm not proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not allow that in the film today. I should have. At the time, I felt uncomfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I did it anyway because I was pressured to by the producers that we need to have the scene
that's how it
in
works.
the film. Because that's how it works. I was 22, 23 years old, directing my first feature film, which was my lifelong passion. And there were certain creative decisions that I didn't agree with. But it's like, you either do this or you don't make the film.
Do you think being pressured into that, as well as the idea that, snuff films could exist and films like One Lunatic, One Ice Pick exist, do you think that kind of has soured filmmaking for you a little bit?
No.
No?
Not necessarily, no.
Interesting.
I feel like it's a different thing.
It's completely different to you? You can separate
Not
the two?
Not completely different, but I can separate the two.
Yeah, because to me, it's almost like that thing of it's almost like it sullies the art a little bit,
It could, yeah. Just I see where you're coming from.
For me personally, it makes it hard for me to watch movies like Saw, things like that. Mm-hmm. First off, because I get kind of bored. I'm just like, I don't want to watch.
Well, most of them suck. Yes, the thing too.
Things like that. I'm just like, that's fucking boring.
Yeah.
But also the idea that it's like, ugh, should we really be like, get off on violence? It's like that thing of like,
and
is that creating a weird?
Maybe because the scene in question is a scene of sexual violence, and directing that, having to be on set it was one of those situations where most of the crew was gone.
I can see how uncomfortable you are now,
and also being responsible for it.
Yeah,
it's like
having your name associated with that.
I'm making this happen. This is happening because I am making this, and and I think if this movie's not that old. We shot it in. I want to say 2009 or something. Today, I think I would be able to convince the producers that this is a bad idea. I think, fortunately, culture has moved along. There's still a long way to go.
Definitely.
But for scenes like that, just say like, oh, well, we need to sell DVDs, so you need to put the scene in the movie. And I think today I would be able to argue stronger. And also, I'm older and probably more confident in certain aspects. It's like, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, you're more in control of your art.
Yeah, and it didn't get me anywhere, but because I haven't made a film since, except for one no one will ever see.
Welcome to having an art degree.
Yeah, I have a degree in screenwriting, so.
I have a degree in theater, and both of us are not doing that.
Not doing that, yes.
But we're podcasting and we are creating art in a way, so there.
Yes.
They said we'd never use our art degree, so there.
I can't make films, but you can hear me endlessly talk about them.
There you go.
Okay, so snuff films.
So snuff films. Don't want your snuff films. Please don't send us any links or anything like that.
We're not asking.
That's not what I want. Yeah. But if you guys have, an opinion of what you think, why you think people watch gore, why you think these things are out there, feel free to discuss that. Feel free to bounce back any feedback. You can find me on Facebook and find me on iTunes and Google Play, all of the podcasting apps. You can also follow me on Instagram at No Heidi Only Zool. Where can we find you, Chris?
I'm on Facebook, Christopher R. Smith.
Don't forget the R.
Yeah, don't forget the R, because if you look up Christopher Smith, you're going to find a lot of people who aren't me. Yeah, so just if I can plug some things, most of them you're involved with anyway. But
plug away.
This A Schilling for Your Thoughts is a part of the Papago Podcast Network.
You don't say.
And you can find other shows, Campfire Curmudgeon, which you also host with Nicholas Edward Jones.
Show.
I host a show with Nicholas Edward Jones called Auteur Theory. Season 1, we're working through the films of David Cronenberg. Heidi was just on an episode.
I was. Maybe not the best episode, but you can listen to the rest. They're really good.
Yeah. Was that last night?
Yes, I was.
I can't even tell. It
Yes,
seems so long ago.
I know.
Yes.
It's like, yes.
And then also in that episode was Dirk Heron, who I host another show with called Slash Page, where we talk about horror comics. And there's going to be a lot more coming.
And some cool stuff. If you guys haven't checked out the Papago Podcast Network yet, definitely you need to do that. You can find that page on Facebook.
And we'll just put all the updates out there. We've got new specials, new shows. We're just going to keep adding and keep building this thing.
Yeah, you can also find it on papagopodcastnetwork.com.
That's it, yeah.
So check that out, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.